In today's episode of Silicon Springbok, I speak to Bevan Ducasse, who's CEO and co-founder of YOYO. No, not the toy manufacturer, but a South African tech startup that did go through some massive ups and downs. Some really interesting stories here, some real great bravery. I really encourage you to have a listen. I'm Don Pateau, the CEO of Joyforge Labs, and this is the episode with Bevan Ducasse. Before we get into it, I do apologize for some of the sound issues. They will be sorted out by next time. We are still learning. Thanks so much, Bevan, for joining us. I hope you're ready to share all the stuff coming from the heart, what it's like to be an entrepreneur. But to kick us off, just very, very quickly, tell us a bit about how you came to be like leading YOYO it is today. I know it's gone through some forms and changes, but what do you do today? Just give us the headlines.
Yeah, well, I mean, I won't go into the full backdrop of how I started it because, as you say, it's been a 16-year journey, and we'll probably get to that. But firstly, thanks for having me, Don. Good to be here. So YOYO, we're a rewards software company. We've had a lot of iterations, which I'm sure we'll cover. But currently, we're a South African-based in the main. We've just offloaded an offshore business, so we had a whole kind of global reward software company, which we'll get to. But right now we're about 110 people, a lot smaller than we have been. But it's a reward software where we effectively have integrated 22,000 retail stores into our software stack, and we allow big corporates to issue rewards and gift cards through our platform. So we do about 3 billion Rand of value a year through our platform. So it's fairly sizable at the moment.
Okay, so just give me an example of what that looks like. I don't know. I walk into exclusive books. Maybe are they one of your clients? Like what are you doing there for them? Who's in this who's in the background here? What does the value chain look like?
Yeah, so we have all the retailers integrated, but normally the corporates are the ones issuing. So, for example, a Discovery, if you with Discovery Vitality, and you go to the gym and you kind of achieve their goals, and they issue you a smoothie for Kauai. They hit our API and they're actually issuing that smoothie via our software. So when you walk into Kauai and you scan a QR code, our software actually checks the basket data, checks that you have a smoothie, and real time kind of give you that discount. We also manage all the settlement and recon between Discovery and Kauai. If you eBucks and you convert your eBucks into a retail voucher, we power that. If you Vodacom and you shake your phone to buy data, we power all the rewards, so whether it's ice creams or grocery vouchers or fuel vouchers. So we typically sit behind the scene of all these large corporates and their reward programs, and they're utilizing us to fulfill these rewards to their consumers.
Okay, so my assumption is each one of them, let's say Discovery, I mean, it's a huge behemoth. They've got hundreds of developers, thousands, if not thousands. So they could build this. It's just that managing all of these different places to be able to get the rewards and keeping it up to date and fresh and good and is more valuable for them to use you than to try and do it themselves. Is that really where your competitive edge comes in?
To a certain extent, I think our moat is twofold. So the one large moat that we have is we've taken 15 years to integrate all the different retail point of sales. If you think about rolling out a button onto a ShopRite, Checkers, Pick n Pay, Engen, their point of sale, training their cashiers on that redemption button.
Isn't that easy? A couple of lines of code.
Lines of code. So it's taken us years to build out that network, and it's basically across, like I say, grocery, fuel, pharmacy, everything you can think of. So for a Discovery to go and reinvent that, it's firstly not core business. The retailers, if they go to a retailer and say, we want to issue a reward, the retailer just pushes them to us. They say, we already have an integration. They're not going to spend 6 months doing one integration for one corporate. We have 180 different corporates issuing volume through us. So it's a nice network effect where the more corporates you have issuing volume, the more the retailer, you're providing value to the retailer and sending revenue to the retailer, and vice versa. So it's a great network effect. The stronger we get on both sides, the less likely they are to cut you out, because a retailer won't want to integrate to a single corporate when they already have 180 through us, and vice versa.
Yeah, but I imagine this is not how things started out. Like, this is the grand plan. You knew exactly where to go, all the steps along the way. It was just obvious, because looking back, it's like, yeah, obviously people want to do this, and obviously corporates want to use a system like yours to issue rewards. If I really think back in the early 2000s, I don't remember there being so many rewards. This was something that companies really did only for themselves, this kind of network effect. Just, I don't know, doesn't seem like it was there. So, I mean, tell me the early days, what was the idea? And then, because I understand you first were going B2C, and then now I'm hearing, well, effectively you're a big B2B player. That's quite a big shift. So tell me about the beginning. What was the first pivot like?
Sure. So you're 100% correct. I mean, we failed into this versus us kind of, knowing exactly what we're going to do. So my first idea, I'll take you back, we were founded the business with a partner of mine sort of end of 2007. And the first idea I had was actually paying with your phone. So linking a credit card to an app, downloading that onto your phone and paying in store. So that was the idea I had, which nowadays we all use Apple Pay, Google Pay, and every other, but this was 16 years ago. So before that Apple had even launched in our market, which was quite crazy to think about. So we were downloading an app from a Mobi site on your phone, on Samsung flip phones. It was very early days. And anyway, that's what I raised capital. It was a typical bootstrap story, worked out of my flat, had a handful of people coming in, building out this. It was very exciting. We eventually launched that product in 08. So 8th of August 2008, I bought my first coffee using my phone. So it was an amazing kind of achievement to kind of bring it to fruition. But almost as quickly as we had started, we realized we just weren't getting scale. We're trying to convince banks that this mobile payment thing was safe. We're trying to convince big retailers to integrate us. We're trying to convince customers to pay with their phone when, they were still quite skeptical about putting cards online. So we were really kind of swimming upstream. And in 2010, we had a moment where we just realized, I guess it was a lead up to that moment, but I eventually realized we just were never going to get to break even fast enough. And, you'll recall back in those days, we didn't have VC funding where people would just keep throwing funding at something, knowing that maybe in 10 years you'll break even. South Africa, 2008, 9, 10, the corporates that were investing were like, you need to break even in 18 months. So we were forced to kind of take a long, hard look, and it was a very difficult, phase, because I had to go back to my shareholder and say, look, our idea hasn't actually worked. The spreadsheet I showed you in 2007 wasn't quite making out to be what we thought it would. So it's a very difficult thing, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs get to that point where the reality is your first idea didn't work, and it wasn't going to plan. And so it was a failed idea, but we learned a lot from that. And we took pieces of what we had built. So we had built this integration layer to point of sale for our app, and we had built this app. And so the only idea I had, more out of necessity than out of brains, was actually we can use the software, and I think some retailers might want to pay me for their own brand and for them to utilize it for their own customers. And so we were kind of forced to innovate and to change our ideas, and that's how we ended up in a B2B. And fortunately, I managed to convince my investors that this new idea would work. A pretty big shift from B2C to B2B. The only good thing about an investor having money in the business is to ask for a little bit more. It's kind of either lose everything or just put a little bit more and keep us alive. So that was really the pitch. And that's how we pivoted. And fortunately, we then started gaining some traction to, keep us alive.
I mean, you're talking about like a 2-year period in which, you were the Bevan Ducasse who had not been successful, who had not started a great company, who, I mean, had no credibility. You'd had a crazy idea and that hadn't worked. And maybe a lot of people had said to you, no, that won't work. And you went ahead anyway, burned money, hired people who now depended on you, left jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not trivial.
Yeah.
What was it like when did you have this realization on your own, or were other people saying, Bevan, you need to stop? Or were you seeing the wall coming that you were going to crash into and go, like I've been through this, and you're like, I'm going to need to tell people that I've lost confidence in the plan, that I have been
preaching to everybody as certain success, I need to now tell them I don't know. I'm unsure.
No, you're 100% right. I mean, I think 16 years on, you probably forget how difficult that phase was, and obviously I've had a lot of probably tougher times. So I think when I compare it to the even bigger challenges I've had, it seems small. But at the time, as you say, I was 25 by the time we pivoted in 2010. I was 23 when I raised the capital, and I do remember it being an incredibly stressful time because, as you say, you've sold the dream to many people. I had a lot of people saying it's not going to work pre the raise, and in the raise, and you obviously having to, ignore the naysayers and carry on. You always read the books, don't listen to the naysayers, and so I was doing that. And then, fortunately, you don't wake up one night and realize you're a failure. I think if you're living,
you realize you're a failure slowly.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And so for me, I think it was. You keep trying to pivot. You keep trying to be creative to solve problems, which is what you have to do. But slowly but surely, you start realizing the reality that actually, no matter how creative I am, you are facing some pretty big hurdles, and you have to start. And it's always the $1 million or $1 billion question. At what point do you decide, this isn't going to work? Versus, you also hear equally people saying, I had to just push through and persevere and have grit. And you make it. So I don't think there's ever a right answer to that. I think you've got to play the board as it lies. And I think we got to a point gradually where I realized there were too many forces working against us, where I felt, we got there, as you say, I realized we're a failure gradually. And then I think it is difficult because I had to go back to my board and say, look, my first idea didn't work, but I promise you have some faith in my next idea.
Now I have the answer, yeah.
Now I have the answer.
But you've been having board meetings in between, right? You've been saying next quarter, this thing that we're doing now, that's going to solve the problem, right?
Totally.
And then
not quite. Yeah, so there are two interesting things in that. And, one, if you're taking your shareholders on a journey, it's easier to get to that point because you don't just phone them out the blue and say, we failed. They're kind of understanding where you are on the journey. So they are also equally seeing the concerns leading up to that. So it's not a big moment of, oh, well, we didn't know. So I think open communication with shareholders, which fortunately we had, was quite key in being able to then pivot because they know that, they can trust you. You've been sharing the information all the way to that point. A lot of it's self-awareness. It's how you show up in those moments that I think is probably the biggest lesson, that I've had to sort of work through over the years.
What do you mean by how you show up?
So how I show up, I realized that the way I engage with my team or with clients or with problems very much sets the thermometer around how everyone else around me is going to show up or engage or, so I'll give an example. If something is uncomfortable at work because it's not working or the performance is bad or our system's down or, and you have these uncomfortable moments or periods, some of them are huge, like blow-ups like we've had, and some are minor. But in all of those, I've realized that if I show up better, in other words, if I'm more gracious in my response, if I'm more wise and slow to respond to it, and I step back and I say, okay, this is what's happening. It's not this individual or myself. And then I can be objective in that and I can decide how I want to respond versus react to it. It has a major impact on how well we get through that. And when I found myself reacting, all that happens is it makes that situation worse. The people around me respond worse, maybe frustrate my clients, So my experience is that's just been one of the biggest lessons to learn and to keep learning is how I respond sets the tone for a lot of what happens, and equally my leadership and leaders below them, right? We're all learning these lessons.
I reflect on that. For me, it was a big shock at some point to realize if I walked through the office with a smile on my face, everybody around me was having a good day. Yeah. If I was like, and you came to office and you're like, oh, there's that thing, and you got to solve that problem, and there's this thing, and you're trying to, I got to sort these things out. You don't have a smile on your face. Everyone else is having a bad day.
Totally.
And I was like, but come on, it can't be like that they need me to be happy for them to be happy.
Yeah.
Well, actually, they do. They take their cue from the leader, who is, if he thinks the business is going well and doing well and is smiling, well, then they also think it's going to happen. And you got to control that somehow and still be authentic, which you can do.
Exactly.
But I think it's very powerful thinking about every day showing up as your best possible self for that day.
Yeah.
You're still going to screw it up. But very interesting.
And catching yourself. I remember, to your point, there were days where I'd feel quite down about something. And I remember purposefully saying, let me not go to the office right now. Let me go to a coffee shop. Let me think about what's happening and then arrive with a frame of mind. So to your point, you're not showing up in an unauthentic way, but you're just processing it, making sure you're clear on what's actually happening. Because if you're snapping and reacting to people, they're going to end up snapping and reacting. And I will say that it does take very wise and very smart people. And I think I have people on my team like that. And hopefully sometimes I'm like that with my shareholders, where you can have someone who can catch how a manager or a leader is responding. And if you're really well and self-aware, you can actually, reflect that back and then actually change the course, which is very, very rare. But I will say that, I have seen that, which is pretty impressive in people.
Okay, to move on to the next phase, I always think this is interesting because I know you raised a lot of money, 10 million Rand, or $10 million. Was it 10 million Rand or $10 million? Must be $10 million.
Dollars. $10 million, yeah.
Serious raise in 2015. Okay, so if I guess 2008, you guys are getting going. 2015, you raised money, but you figured out the problem in 2010. Like, come on, man, what took so long? Like, why does it take so long to have a business that's successful? And then obviously you get the money and then you are just successful. That's it. Like you've solved all problems. At least that's how a lot of entrepreneurs think when they're starting out. Like it's all about getting to this validation that somebody will give you a lot of money.
Yeah.
I just am interested to know, like, it still took a long time.
Yeah.
And when you get the money, it feels actually like that's the beginning, right? You're going back to square one.
Totally, yeah. So two things. I'll address both of those. I think the first one, yes, it took a long time. I think part of that was because we weren't, again, Silicon Valley raising rounds early on, we had to get to break even. So we actually got to break even by 2012, which was 2 years after our pivot. And then we were hamstrung because we were trying to use our own cash flow to make these micro improvements. And there is a reality. If you want to grow a software company, you have to build products. You have to productize it first. So you have to invest in the asset for the asset to eventually, pay returns. And we didn't really have that luxury. So we kind of bumbled along with a fairly reasonable product market fit, but not a great productized product. And that took longer than it should have because, number one, I didn't know that at the time. I probably didn't have the confidence to go and raise a big round early on. I kind of wanted this thing to prove. I didn't want to go back into needing to raise money. I'd already been there and it was a scary, scary thing. But I think it was a combination of, I realized by 2015, we were just going to carry on bumbling along and be a reasonably good business. But in order to properly scale and become something significant, we had to invest. So we had to take that leap of, I need to raise money, to do that. So that, I think, answers why it took long, but it was definitely a hard road to get there. And a lot of hustle, right? I mean, we had to really hustle hard, as us South Africans do well. And then 2015, I think, to other points, there were a lot of things that I learned in that. I mean, the one, some of the $10 million was exiting my sort of original shareholders. They sort of took some money off the table. And the big kind of lesson I learned there was we were raising at a valuation that I thought was high as the entrepreneur. And I went with it because I thought, if people are willing to pay that price, that's actually kudos, right? I mean, that's our valuation. It's what everybody, to your point, strives for. And what I realized is the opposite is true because you're the guy who now has to make that valuation a reality. And so that was a hard lesson to learn. 2015, you raise money, it's wonderful, you're in the press, but you very quickly realize the pressure is now really on. And to your point, now we really start. You don't, you're not finished when you raise money, you start when you raise money. And for me, it was a big realization that, the bigger your raise, the more you have to return. And the bigger your value, the more you have to kind of achieve that. So, so I think we were put under quite a lot of pressure because of that. We had a big raise at a big valuation, and in hindsight, it was too high. I think, again, if I had more experience, I would have pushed back and said, look, that valuation is too high. I didn't have the experience, and so I went with what my investors said. That's what their valuation they wanted. But it did put us in a sort of really challenging couple of years. We had to, have hyper growth and hyper scale. And I always say business can only scale as fast as what the product market fit is achieving, and I think if you try and force too much growth, again, if you're lucky enough to build WhatsApp and it's just scales on platforms, it's one thing. But our business was quite operationally intensive when we started. Yes, when you get to scale, it can grow. So anyway, a lot of hard lessons in that time. Just board meeting after board meeting, kind of staring at these forecasts and targets and going, how are we going to achieve that? And it's not a great place to be, because I think you end up building for growth versus building for clients and building for joy. And that, again, I had to learn that the hard way, because I couldn't get out of it just by a magic wand. I had to fulfill this. And I think, fortunately, as a team, we all kind of say, like, actually, if people put money behind us, we want to be good for it. So we really worked hard, but it was not an enjoyable time. It was quite high stress. We were growing, we were scaling globally. We ratcheted up to 175 people in a very short space of time. So it was fun in the sense there was a lot of scale, a lot of growth, but it was very stressful.
But from the outside, I'm sure it seems successful.
Yeah.
But did you have a moment where everything could have been lost, or almost everything was lost after that, under all that pressure, after you've spent a decade putting your life into it? Was there a moment like that?
Yeah, so 2018, which was only 3 years after that raise, we had our biggest blow up, which was, I think, still something that sits with me today. So as I shared earlier, we're processing kind of hundreds of millions of brands. And in our finance team, there was some mismanagement of kind of client float with our operational float and what we're doing operationally. And that mismanagement then turned into misrepresentation. So the numbers we were getting were started to be falsified because people didn't want to admit to it. And I won't go into the detail, but just needless to say, I woke up one day, I was coming back from an overseas trip trying to get clients in Australia, and came back to a hard reality that there was a hole that was tens of millions of rands big. And it was the most stressful time of my life. I mean, you've got shareholders asking you very relevant questions like, how did you not know? Or even worse, they think you were in on it. I had clients thinking, we are major in their world and we might not be around, and also where we're misappropriating their funds. I had to retrench 30 people in 30 days. So I had to basically restructure a business in 2 weeks, having never let go of anybody. So from that to, and then you have a lot of doubt in yourself. I clearly had to take some of the ownership. I mean, if I'm running the company and we're in this mess, I had to take a long, hard look at myself. So in amongst trying to fix everything, I'm going, well, why was my leadership allowing this to happen? Why would people feel that they couldn't share this with me? So it was just a massively difficult time, where, it took me years to recover, quite honestly. But I think step one was just,
it's traumatic, right? It's like trauma. It's you've lost something. It's like, I don't know, totally. Death in the family.
Yeah, I've had deaths I've had deaths maybe not as close to my family, but I mean this was by far and large the worst thing. Happened to coincide with the month of my wedding, which was also interesting. So I found out in that month, I got married at the end of the month, and I had to retrench my best man and the guy that was marrying me. So it was it was
You're
crazy.
kidding. You had
It
to
was crazy.
retrench your best man.
Yeah, no, not many people get to say that.
Jeez.
So no, but I joke
Sorry.
about it, but it was a really, really difficult time, and as I say, it took us months and months and months to rebuild, and we literally just had to wake up every day and say, I didn't know how we were going to get out of it, but I knew that if we just, and this is where the sort of previous lessons come in. Sometimes you can't see how you're going to get out of a bad situation, but if you just wake up every day, choose to make the best decisions you can make for that day, and then hope the rest takes care of itself. And very grateful to say that, because of an incredible team that were, there with me and kind of fought through the hard times, and, just kept on trying to do the right thing, we've managed to come out, so it is quite amazing, but nevertheless, not something you want to go through.
Well, let me ask you the question I ask every Silicon Springbok, which is, why didn't you just give up? Go and get a good job at a corporate. It's a much easier life, much more stable. You've got a family now to think about. Why don't you give up in those moments?
It's a great question. And I think for me, there are a number of factors that made me stick it out. One, I feel like, and I think there's an element of a South Africanness in this, but when you have people that give you a chance, that put money behind you, I felt a massive sense of responsibility to be good for that. It's just my upbringing. It was like, I can't just ditch them when tough times come, and I think that was one. I got that from my dad, who was a farmer and just always stuck it out. The second one was my team. I'd committed to the team for a greater future. And, in that moment, if I had ditched them, that the company would have gone. I mean, they would have all lost their jobs. And there was just so much that I had to push through to kind of make it right for them. Even if I didn't know how it was going to happen, like that was crucial for me. And the third one was the clients. Again, you've a lot of them are, I think, the commitment, your word you make to people. So my word to my investors, my word to my team, and my word to my clients. That's the only thing you've got. So if in my mind, if I made a selfish call for me in that moment, it's you never get that back, And so I think it was such a powerful thing for me to be like, this is what I've committed to people. I have to see this through, and that's what. Because to your point, I mean, it would have been a hell of a lot easier for me to just go get a job and let this crumble down. It was a painful 2 years. The third element, because at the time there was genuinely no interest for me. I mean, I didn't even think. In my brain, I thought, let me stabilize the ship and then I'm going to leave because I'm not fit to be a CEO. That's how I felt.
So that was real.
Yeah, and now where I feel is. I totally feel called to be a CEO and an entrepreneur, right? So, once the healing's happened and now I'm incredibly grateful because I actually get the benefit now as well, right? I love what I do. I love my team. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. But at the time, I would never have said that. So now I can say it is also for me, not only for everyone else. But at the time, yeah, I kind of was going to tap out once it was stable.
Well, this is the key message. I think what I try to communicate with Silicon Springbok is that it is these desperate, tough challenges that, make you feel like I couldn't possibly withstand that. If somebody said to you in 2008, look, man, this is what's going to happen to you in the next decade and so forth, and you're probably going to lose everything and so forth, and it's not going to be financially better for you to do this. Red pill, blue pill. Most people are going to go like, no thanks. Sure. But it is what makes you, in the end, a good CEO and a good leader. Is not that you started off with any innate great abilities, but that you, yes, had resilience. You try to get through these things. But I like try to say is, you're great, not despite the challenges, but because of them. That is what makes you now so strong. Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that the challenges have made me a better person and therefore a better CEO. And that is I think true for most people that go through challenges. If you choose to learn from them, I think, I think I have seen some people go through challenges and it makes them bitter, or it makes them the other way. So I think there's a key choice you get to make, which is, I won't let this define me. It took me a long time to get there, to be fair. I think I'd lost a lot of confidence. I'd lost my passion. So it really took a long time. But through that process, you do learn a lot.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Bevan. It's been great to hear your story. And, obviously we continue to root for you and YOYO, and make sure that, this continues the story and helps to grow South Africa. And wish you all the best, man. Well done.
Thank you, Don. Good to chat. Cheers, man.
Cool, man.
Well, what do you think? Would you have been able to let one of your best friends go? That is such a tough decision. I don't know if I could have made that. And, hats off to Bevan for having built a good company so far. We wish him all the best. Here are our social media platforms. We're on YouTube and on LinkedIn and on Facebook and on Spotify. Please come and subscribe, give us some feedback, and let us know who you think could be the next Silicon Springbok. Thanks very much. See you on the next episode.